Well, it's time now for a CNBC-TV18 exclusive. The government is concerned about the private investment cycle not taking off just yet. Ministries have been asked to reach out to industry to find out why investments and capacity building are not taking place. That's not all. The centre is also mulling tax breaks for select sectors to try and drive private CAPEX. Parikshit Tutta standing by with more in the CNBC-TV18 exclusive. Parikshit.
Well, the government has been concerned about the pace of private sector investment and why it's not really been taking off, barring a few sectors. Now, all ministries ahead of the budget have been asked to hold stakeholder consultations with different companies, with different industries, take feedback on why they're not making further investments, what will be needed in order to add additional capacity as well. Some feedback they have received is indicating about a global slowdown, and many companies, many sectors don't see a strong demand globally, because of which they're not making those big investments right now. Ministries have been asked to make suggestions on ease of doing business as well. There are certain tax breaks which are being considered for sectors in order to drive demand, domestic demand, allow companies to tap into domestic demand and also drive investment as well. PLI schemes, we believe that very high-level reviews of PLI schemes have been taking place. The government believes that many of these PLI schemes are still in very early stages, and it will take some time for those investments to actually be seen on the ground as well. Some of the sectors from whom feedback has been sought include steel, white goods, solar PV modules, cement, auto components, and all of them are being asked as to why the pace of investment has been slow so far and what can be done to speed up private investment.
We will do everything to get industry coming and investing here. Give PLI. We've given PLI. I want to hear from the Indian Inc. What's stopping you? When countries and industries abroad think this is the place to be in now, at this time, FDIs are coming, FPIs are coming, it's all, the stock market is so confident, the Indian retail investor believes in them. Is it like Hanuman? You don't believe in your own capacity, in your own strength, and has there got to be somebody, standing next and say, hey, you're Hanuman, do it.
Well, that is the finance minister there in September asking industry what was holding it back from making investments. Now, let's talk about PLI. The production-linked incentive schemes have not taken off across many sectors. Also, it is important to contextualize this. The PLI schemes have been staggered. Not all of them were notified on the same date. In a recent speech, the Chief Economic Advisor, Anantha Nageshwaran, was citing data from the DPIIT as of September this year. The data shows that pharmaceutical drug manufacturing has achieved 107% of the investment target that the government had envisaged. However, only 13% of the employment target has been realized so far. Remember, the PLI scheme for the pharmaceutical sector was first off the block in 2020. The other relative outperformers are also linked to pharma, with active pharma ingredients and medical devices faring better than some of the other sectors on both parameters. Mobile phone manufacturing has realized 38% of the investment target, but only 5% of the employment target. The food product sector, meanwhile, has achieved 54% of the investment target and 49% of the employment target. It must be noted that pharma PLI schemes, as I mentioned, were among the first off the block when they were launched in 2020. In sharp contrast, the electronic PLI was launched in April 2020, has achieved less than 5% of the stated investment target and less than 0.5% of its employment target. Of the PLI schemes launched in 2021, specialty steel, automobiles, drones and their components have not seen any investment so far. White goods PLI scheme has seen 13% of its investment goal being met and 16% of its employment target. However, two schemes launched in 2022 have already seen some traction. Solar panels have seen 27% investment and 8.5% of the employment target being achieved so far. Textile PLI has seen about 7% of its investment goal being met, though no employment under the scheme has been generated so far. Well, to talk about where we currently stand as far as private CAPEX is concerned, and more importantly, whether additional tax breaks will really change the cycle around. We're now joined by Subhash Chandra Garg, the former Finance Secretary. Mr. Garg, appreciate you joining us here on CNBC-TV18. That was the Finance Minister's message to industry in September. And for the benefit of our viewers, we've revisited the PLI data as was put out by the Chief Economic Advisor. And again, as I'm contextualizing, the notification dates, the rollout dates differ for different schemes. But what I want to understand from you, is it fair, given the fact that capacity capacity utilization across sectors varies between 60 to 70%, so 30% continues to be idle. Do we expect industry to set up fresh capacity when they don't have demand visibility?
So the data which the chief economic advisor put out actually gave you a very good state of the play as far as the PLI schemes are concerned. And the PLI schemes are basically for industrial investments. They are not for infrastructure where much more investment flow is needed and is taking place through the government to some extent. So let's focus on the industrial investments through PLI or otherwise. And there, if you again go a little bit deeper into it, there are PLIs which are targeting essentially the digital innovations or investments, for example, on the semiconductors, and some parts which get into other goods like white goods and others, where electronic chips and others are making the difference. And the rest are more traditional industries like textiles and steel, and to some extent that kind. The data which is there is the data of the investments committed to the government and approved. It's not of the investment which has taken place and the disbursements which the government has made. From the disbursement point of view, if you look at it, only two disbursements to my mind has taken so far, and nothing seems to be very much in the horizon very soon. So the state of play in PLI, which is our cutting edge, which is our most crucial intervention in the investment side, is not very good, and that is what we should. It should make us sit up and take notice that why is it. And if you go into that, in my judgment, there are two problems. The problem number one is that we have PLI, which is very widely disbursed now. There are 13 sectors. If you add up products, there are more than 30, 40 products for which the PLI is being granted. It's becoming general. It's not focused. It was very well when it was focused on the mobile phones. It was also somewhat well when it was focused on, let us say, semiconductors, though there are different kind of problems on the semiconductors. But when it spreads to white goods, textiles and others, you lose the focus. That's one. Second, these are all in a way incentive driven, that the government will pay incentive if you produce that kind of investment in exports. And these are no different from the earlier kind of investments which the states were giving through the investment promotion schemes and all. And therefore, there is enormous amount of bureaucratic problems in implementation of this. And that gives me some doubts that the PLI actually will not achieve if you have so much thinly spread and so many PLIs.
Okay, so you're saying that widening the PLI ambit is not necessarily the best way forward. In fact, we're given to understand that at this point in time, the government is considering bringing more sectors under the PLI scheme. In fact, a separate or a second PLI scheme for vaccine manufacturing specifically, and raw materials linked to vaccine manufacturing being considered at this point in time. But Mr. Garg, you know, and I'm looking at the CMI data that's come in. It says new investment proposals to create fresh productive capacities in the private sector seem to have recovered. Preliminary data from CMI's CAPEX database shows that investments proposals worth 3.1 trillion rupees were made by the private sector during the quarter ended September 2022. This is higher than the new investments proposed by the private sector in the past. So, you know, is it a matter of time? Because again, as I pointed out, several of these schemes were notified. The execution is just about starting. That we will see a pickup. Are we on the cusp of a recovery, you think?
See, if you, our capital investment per year is about 55 to 60 lakh crores. The government makes about 7 lakh crores to 7.5 lakh crores of the capital investment. In this context, a 3 trillion rupees commitment is really small. It looks like better than the previous quarters or something. But if you look at the overall kind of investment which needs to take place and which takes place, this is very small. So it doesn't give me that sense that if there is a small pickup, and again, some of these investment intentions don't really translate into actions, like what happens in most of these states. In these investment kind of summits, a lot of froth is there in the MOUs which are signed and all. The translation rate is very small at 10 to 15% or even less in some cases. So I don't think you should read this CMI pickup as a sign or as a confirmation of a massive upturn or turnaround in the investment side.
Yeah, it is with that caveat that these are investment proposals that we are speaking of. But Mr. Garg, you know, we're a couple of months away from the budget consultation process is underway. As Parikshit was telling us just a short while ago, ministries have been asked to reach out to industry to try and find out what's holding investment back. Do you think any tax intervention at this point in time is warranted? Will that really move the needle? Because it comes back again to the point that I made, that if you don't have demand visibility, no matter what tax break you get, will you actually add fresh capacity?
Absolutely. So the businessman will make investment only if the businessman sees a profit at the end, and the profit comes only if there is a demand. You don't make investment for the sake of for its own sake without actually visibility of profit being there. And the government had done has taken lots of steps to that. The biggest one was the manufacturing companies being subjected to a very low tax of 15%. What better tax incentive can be there if you believe that the tax can or tax incentives can incentivize investments, and that manufacturing company taxation at this rate has actually not taken off. What else you can give, and why, unless, as you all and me were saying, unless there is a demand pickup. And if you analyze from that point of view, the traditional industrial production is actually, the capacity utilization is much less. It's about 70 to 73%. There, much of the demand can come from export, but there we have some of the policy problems which we just look at the steel industry for that matter. When the steel industry had started producing for the world, we put export taxes. And that has killed the exports demand in the steel industry. Likewise, if you look at the renewable sector, we have a lack of clarity. What do we want? We want make in India of the modules and cells, or we want higher investment in the electricity sector. And when we put up the anti-dumping duties and other kind of extra duties for the import of cells, we may make the domestic investment in cells and modules somewhat better, but it may not be enough, and that's why the investment is not taking place. But we also kill in the process the investment in the renewables. And that confusion in the policy, I am tempted to say that the finance ministry invites people to act like Hanuman. She's appealing to the reptilian tendency of the businessman, the animal spirits. But the business is not animal spirits. Business is a lot of cool-headed calculations. And unless that calculations tell you that they profit at the end of it, the animal spirits don't count. I don't think that works.
Yes, well, at this point in time, across surveys, industry is still talking about wanting to wait for another 6 months at least to be able to get a firm grip on what the domestic demand situation looks like, and more importantly, the fragile global recovery that we were seeing, which is, of course, also faltered on account of the many developments that we've seen globally, inflation rising, and, of course, interest rates as well.
We
Yes,
had
sir.
the opportunity. There was a China Plus, which provided us opportunity. There was a bump up in the global demand post-COVID. And that opportunity we have, in fact, allowed to slip by. The Vietnams of the world have taken that much more. And today, Vietnam produces a lot of industrial goods, much more than what the India does. Electronics. Vietnam production is about 10 times of what we produce. And instead of looking for next, which is perhaps a period where there is a global recession and the demand side would be much lower globally as well as domestically, I think we should think about why we have allowed this opportunity to go by.
Mr. Garg, always a pleasure. Appreciate you joining us here on CNBC TV18. That's it then on this edition of Business 360. We're going to take a break and return with a lot more news. Don't go anywhere. We're back in a minute.